Hello, my name is Father Nightingale, and in this video I'll begin to answer the question, when is marriage null? This is a question people often have when they're trying to get married and they've been through the experience of marriage before, and so they're asking a lot of questions where there aren't a lot of resources, at least in video format. Questions like, what is canon law? How does it work? What does the church understand by marriage? And what is this annulment thing? Is this the same as divorce or is it different? And so in this video, I'll start to give an answer to these questions. The main source I'll be using for answering these questions is the Code of Canon Law. I've got one right here. The Code of Canon Law contains more or less all the laws that govern Catholics, the entirety of their disciplinary life. So what are the rights and duties of the faithful? How do the different sacraments work? Who can do them? And then on marriage, what is marriage? What are its properties? How do you make a marriage? And how do you investigate to see if the marriage was valid or invalid, if there's something deficient there, or whether it's to be upheld. The first canon in the Code on Marriage is Canon 1055, and this canon gives kind of the definition of marriage. It says it involves a man and a woman. It's the partnership of the whole of life, and its purpose is the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. And also that when it happens between baptized persons, it's a sacrament. That gives it a special dignity and a special grace and purpose. The next canon on marriage is Canon 1056, which names the essential properties of marriage, and it names two of them here. They're called unity and indissolubility. Unity means that you can only be married to one person. If you're married to someone, you can't be married to anyone else. And the second property is indissolubility, which means that once you're married to someone, you're married to them until the very end of life. Till death do us part is what it means. The third canon on marriage is Canon 1057, and this is important because it tells you how to make marriage, what makes a marriage. I'll just read it. It says, the consent of the parties legitimately manifested between persons qualified by law makes marriage. Okay, so there are three characteristics that were named there. You need juridically able persons, exchange of consent between those persons, and it must be legitimately manifested. If you have all three of those things, you have marriage. It's now necessary to explain what validity and invalidity means. What does it mean for something to be valid or null? And this is a concept that doesn't just apply to marriage, but also applies to other forms of contract. So, for example, if you make a contract to sell something, only a person who owns that property or has some right over it is able to enter into a valid contract to sell that property. And if that person doesn't own it or doesn't have the right, then the contract is invalid. The contract can't have any effects. It can't be recognized by the law. And so you have an invalid contract. The action did not happen. You also have this notion of invalidity, validity in the sacraments. So to take an example other than marriage, take baptism. With baptism you need water and you need the words, I baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And so if you're lacking either of those things, the words or the water, you don't have a baptism. And someone who wants to be baptized would have to be baptized over again using the correct words and using real water. There's actually a case in the Middle Ages where you had some bishop who was baptizing with beer. I guess they didn't have very good water, so they figured, well, beer is good, so we'll use that instead. And then someone wrote the Pope saying, hey, is this okay that we're doing this? And the Pope said, no, it is not okay that you're doing that. You need to go rebaptize all those persons using real water because those baptisms are invalid. Now, taking this notion of validity and nullity, we then look at marriage and ask, so when is marriage null? How do we know if it's valid or null? And the starting point has to be Canon 1060. I'll read it real quick. It says, marriage possesses the favor of law. Therefore, in a case of doubt, the validity of a marriage must be upheld until the contrary is proven. So until there's some kind of process, some investigation of a marriage, you have to assume or take for granted that the marriage is valid, and it's only when there's some doubt about this that you can then enter into a process that could determine otherwise. Now, if you wanted to then have an investigation done of your marriage, you would have to go back to the point when the marriage was made and see if something there was lacking. And so we said before from Canon 1057 that there are three things you need in place for a valid marriage to happen. You need juridically able persons, you need them to exchange consent, and you need that consent to be legitimately manifested. If any of these three things is missing or is sufficiently deficient, then marriage did not happen. And this is the reason why annulment is different from divorce. The idea of divorce is that you have a marriage, and then a judge says, I dissolve this marriage, and now you don't have a marriage anymore. Whereas what's happening in annulment is we have something that looks like a marriage, but there's a doubt about it. There's a doubt, and so a judge investigates it. He gathers proofs, and he makes a decision, and then finally says, no, there's not enough evidence. It looks like there really is a marriage there. Or maybe there's sufficient proofs, sufficient arguments, and the judge says, yes, I declare that this marriage never existed from the beginning. This is an invalid marriage, and the persons who were involved in what looked like this marriage are now free to marry. This is also generally why I avoid using the word annulment. Annulment sounds like it's something the judge does to the marriage. The judge takes a valid marriage and makes it null. Which isn't the case. He's just investigating to see if the marriage is null. So that's why I prefer to call it a marriage nullity judgment or a sentence of marriage nullity, and even the process I'll call a marriage nullity process. But it's not a process that does something to the marriage. Rather, it looks at the marriage, or what looks like a marriage, and makes a declaration about the truth concerning that marriage, concerning that reality or lack thereof. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was helpful for giving you a greater understanding of this topic. And if you have any general questions about canon law, please leave comments below and I'll try to explain the law to the best of my ability. I highly recommend, if you have a personal situation, that you don't rely on just a video like this, but that you call someone. Call your pastor or call the diocesan tribunal, and they can help you and give you the answers to many questions that you might have. God bless.